Women's studies have been essential in providing new and improved perspectives on women's issues, gender, sexuality, and caste, among others. It has also been part of the larger feminist movement in India. But what is the origin of women's studies in India and how has it evolved in the past few decades? Today, in the Feminist Archive, we take a look. Many women's studies scholars argue that the founding point of women's studies in India goes back to a report in 1974 called Towards Equality, published by the Committee on the Status of Women in India. CWSI was appointed by the government in 1972 to make a report on the condition of women in India, a time when the feminist movement in India was also witnessing a powerful rise. The findings of the report prompted the Indian Council of Social Science and Research to fund research projects in universities. In 1974, a unit for research on women was set up in the SNDT Women's University in Bombay, officially becoming a UGC-sponsored center in 1985. This was an important moment as this initiated the feminist intervention in Indian academia, even though the term feminism was not used, mostly because of its association with the women's rights movement in the West as well as in India. The process of institutionalization was facilitated by initiatives like the National Conference on Women's Studies in 1981, where the idea of forming the Indian Association of Women's Studies came into being. It became a platform for the scholars, academics, policymakers, grassroots activists, creators, and publishing houses to come together and facilitate the growth of the field with an interdisciplinary and intersectional perspective. In 1986, UGC also brought out the guidelines for development of women's studies in the Indian universities and colleges, furthering the institutionalization of women's studies. Along with universities, non-academic spaces like autonomous research centers were also established in the 1980s. The Institute of Social Studies Trust, Center for Women's Development Studies, CWDS in Delhi, the Anveshi Research Center for Women's Studies in Hyderabad and Chetna in Ahmedabad being some of the earliest ones. There were in total 16 autonomous organizations with focus on women and 26 women's rights organizations promoting women's studies. The aim of these research centers was including research to generate new data, analysis on various aspects relating to women, introduce women's studies courses in the bachelor's and master's degree and doctoral programs, and enrich the knowledge construction in mainstream academia with a gender lens. The centers of women's studies were meant to encourage an overall transformation of the academic community to address issues that concerned women's lives. Early women's studies scholars were committed to dual tasks of creating social awareness while also developing a multidisciplinary knowledge system capable of understanding, explaining, and theorizing the experiences of women in different locations and in changing times. But this had its own challenges. Due to the involvement of centers with universities and colleges, they could not get involved in campaigns that were overtly critical of the government. Sometimes they failed to receive the support of their institutions or had to suffer a ghettoization rather than impacting other departments. The autonomous organizations, on the other hand, often lacked funding and also did not offer regular teaching programs but acted as a conscience keepers for women's rights agenda setting. Scholars have argued that feminist education should comprise of both feminist scholarship and pedagogy, which is the method and practice of teaching an academic subject. They also point out, in practice, the feminist pedagogy has been grossly neglected. Conferences and meetings held to discuss the strategies and objectives of women's studies in India persistently make efforts to discuss the methodology of teaching a multidisciplinary program such as women's studies. As a result, several universities with academic programs in engineering, medical, management, law, and open and distance learning programs have introduced women's studies, gender studies, degree, diploma, and certificate courses. It is important to note that women's studies as a discipline can't maintain an academic distance from the unfolding ground reality as it has a transformative agenda. There has been polarization of views in several issues, right from family laws, identity and religion, new reproductive technologies, political participation and decision-making, women's reservation, and so on and so forth. Of late, research and debates generated in the field have reached levels of compensatory research where women's perspectives have been added to the conventional discipline instead of more systematic work being done to challenge the mainstream discipline. There's a need to build new paradigms and provide significant theoretical understanding. But yes, a move from women's studies to gender studies is gaining ground in mainstream academia. Existing UGC supported women's studies centers are at a crossroads, and every crossroad leads to a new road. One can hope that the road is of scientific understanding of gender relations leading to gender justice.